quickly that I've got to make sure any recordings exclude anybody else on the screen other than me. And what you should be seeing at this stage is an image of a little bit of an image of a map. Am I correct?
Correct.
Now, I can't. Oh, yes, I can. I can make it a bit bigger now. So, Amy, let's not ask anybody else, right? It's just between you and me, okay? Nobody else out there. Make a fool of yourself. What do you know about Llantrisant? Anything, actually. I don't really want to know if it's about ghosts. You know, you don't have to be about ghosts. It could be about shopping. What do you know about Llantrisant? Set the scene.
Llantrisant is quite a busy place, full of dual carriageways.
Yeah.
I know that it was the place where the first cremation happened, I believe.
Oh, do you know what? Right, because we've got lots of lectures coming up. It's gonna be really good in the second one to look at the Price family. Because we've got a certain Dr. Price, because he cremated his son, Jesus Christ. Cremation become legalized in Britain, but that's what we're going to be doing in the future. We'll be doing that probably in about 6 or 7 weeks when we visit Llantrisant 2 again. Yes, you're really right about Llantrisant. It's a place that's got lots of roads and roundabouts. And do you know what? I've discovered, as I discovered last week, that if you get to the annotation bit here, you can sort of draw. Oh, it's great! It's great drawing. So we did a bit of drawing last week, didn't we? So basically, where are we? Llantrisant itself is. You can see that pink bit there. It's a bit of a weird ridge, and strangely enough, the highest point of the ground, if we change this around, the highest point of the ground is actually over here, which this is higher over here than it is over here, where the castle is. And when I actually used to live in Llantrisant, one of the strange things Michelle always used to ask was, why isn't there a castle over here when this is the highest point of ground? You can look, there is 186 meters above sea level, and this is 174 meters above sea level. So that's a really interesting question. So one thing we're not going to answer is, it's good playing with this, what is in fact here? So that's what we're going to do next time when we look at Llantrisant 2. I've decided to look at Llantrisant tonight with more history, archaeology, and less things that go bump in the night, simply because there's so much to be said about Llantrisant. So it's better to paint the scene on this one and sort of go in a little bit deeper again. What we do have as well, sort of off the map, as it were, over here, a little bit further over here, we've actually got a hill 40 type thing. Again, we'll look at that again. So I'm going to clear my screen. So clear all the drawings. There we go. And oh, I've just put a tick over there by mistake. There we go. Do you know, it's so good getting used to the technology. I've got to be honest with you. So so what we're going to do next is that if I can move on to map number 2. Again, building up the history about Llantrisant. Llantrisant, amazingly enough, so if we zoom in on this map again, and I know a few people do these lectures because they want to know more about the local area, and that's a good thing. Right? So there's no problem with that. So back in with my drawing, you know, I'm going to get a bit carried away with this, aren't I? Interesting enough, Llantrisant actually has its own train line, something like this. And it goes something like this, and it goes something like this, and this is the main, this was the main drag, but today the main drag, other than all that, is actually here. All the pink train lines are basically gone, right? So one thing we can say is that Llantrisant used to have a train line, and you know, Amy, I like telling little personal stories, right?
Yes.
When I moved to Llantrisant, right, I used to get very frustrated that I used to let's get the tick in there and let's change the color. I used to get very frustrated that I used to have to walk all the way from here, all the way through to here, all the way to here, all the way to here, and all the way to here. And it used to take me a good hour, right? And then eventually I managed to do all this route of about 2.5 to 3 miles in 18 minutes. Apparently I found out that that's pretty good running. But before I actually learnt all those routes, right, I decided that it would be a good idea, right, to have gone all the way from Pontyclun, right, to where are we? Just sort of, I decided to go along here, go along here, go along here, go along here, and guess what? This deserted train line, I got lost. But it was like misty, and I got really lost. I got really confused. So I managed to get to this point, and I was so disorientated, I ended up going all the way up here, screaming and shouting to Michelle on the phone, I'm lost in the mist, right? When in fact, if I had just gone up the road, I would have got straight home. So that sets the scene. In fact, it's good to talk a little bit of nonsense, because Llantrisant is a rather interesting place. It's full of secrets. Again, Llantrisant was one of those many places that established a train line and a train station that was nowhere near the town centre. So they eventually closed the train line, but lots of the train line is still there. And when we look at this site here, which is known as Cairo, which is where the hill fort is, I've got another bizarre story to tell you about that, but not this week. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce a little bit. I've got 3 stories from Mary Trevelyan. One of the stories tells us about Llywelyn Bren from an English point of view, naughty people, and one tells us about hawthorn trees. And I believe the hawthorn tree that it's referring to in this book is probably located, if we can bring my little sort of drawing stuff in again, is probably located around here. Oh, hang on a minute. Let's draw. Is probably located around here. That's where the hawthorn tree is when we actually look at it. But most of the stories that we will look at are associated with here, the centre of Llantrisant. But then one of the stories that we do discuss about Llantrisant is further on up this road, which is to a place known as Llantrisant, which has got its own lovely story associated with it. We've got lots of nice little images tonight. So anyway, let's sort of go back to clear my screen again. Go back to my mouse. Hey, I'm gonna have to show you how to use this technology. It's so good. Do you know I could actually screen share and you can do all this stuff? Right. So one of the things that haunts Llantrisant, and sorry you English people out there who get a bit insulted by this, is that the people of Llantrisant decided to go with the Black Prince to the Battle of Crécy to defeat the French, fought with the English, turncoats, splitters, traitors to the cause, and you know, all this against the backdrop associated with this guy there. He's a guy by the name of Llywelyn Bren. And those that have heard about the story about Llywelyn Bren will be well aware of his terrible fate. And his terrible fate, under the hands of this guy, a certain Hugh Despenser, caused the eventual downfall of Edward II, and a certain Edward II having a poker rammed up his posterior on the 24th of September in 1327, all due to the execution of a Welshman. Job done. And this is very much associated with Llantrisant, because the final fate of Edward the second is decided by Llantrisant. Very much so. So moving on a little bit further. Now, do you know what? We're going to actually look at this. Can you see any little faces poking out at you? The answer is no. This up sort of around here, if we can get the sort of my cursor in, up around here, where my little green arrow is, there's some rock carvings, very, very interesting rock carvings. And do you know what? Not many people know there's wonderful rock carvings there that may go way back, but we've got some images of that. That's a place known as Llantrisant. Llantrisant, the place of the two saints, Llantrisant. Again, you could say something similar when we look at Llantrisant, the place of the three saints. But again, less of that today and more of me getting to the grip with technology, more of controlling my mouse and moving on. Oh, there we go. Bingo. Now, this when I through life you learn things, don't you? You make mistakes. And one of the things I can remember is actually going to Llantrisant, not knowing much about it, and giving a little talk there. And I was reading out of a book, and it was about this place here, which is the site of the castle. And this being the site of the castle is also associated with the site of the church. And it's very likely at one stage that this whole area, probably going all the way, something like that, was probably connected by some kind of earthworks to create the original town of Llantrisant. Now, what was Llantrisant? Well, Llantrisant is a place that was probably more than anything founded by those damnable, scumnable Normans. But there may be very much early origins because remember being told by a local historian, a guy by the name of Brian Davis, that in fact, other than the castle here being constructed by the Normans sometime in about the late 1100s, it's very likely, with all the information that we know, that this church is a truly ancient church indeed. It may actually go to AD 600. So in other words, over 1,400 years ago. The place of the three saints, a rather interesting place. Now, Amy, right? Mm-hmm. Your mind is going to be tested. If you've learned anything,
yeah.
What does the following mean? A porch there and a porch there. And north is in this direction. Can you remember having two entrances into a church? What does that mean? Can you remember?
Can I remember two entrances into a church?
A north and a south entrance. Come on, remember, get that brain going. Anything.
North and south entrance. Does that mean it was guarded, perhaps?
The north porch was guarded by the devil. If you can remember.
Right.
Yeah, you can remember that one. We're actually going to go into that. We're actually going to mention a similar story from a place in North Wales called Llangornoi. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce other places into these lectures, because we're going to sort of do loads of ghost stories from all over Wales, but not for a few weeks. But I'm going to introduce stories from elsewhere. So, and over here as well, if we sort of go on this side, is basically that place that's higher than the rest of this landscape. So, and anyone that actually knows, Amy, have you ever heard of something called the Billy Wint? Does that ring a bell?
I don't think I have now.
Well, one little story. If we go, I just thought
definitely
of this.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. If you're going through Llantrisant, if you're going through Llantrisant, and let's get my drawing in again. If you're going through Llantrisant, up here is a strange tower looking out over the road. If you look up, it's called the Billy Gwint or the Billy Wint, and that tower itself, we used to think was some kind of a windmill, and it's still standing there. It's a very strange place to actually go up and see. Yeah, if you've ever seen that on your right, as you pass Llantrisant. Right.
I have seen that.
Yeah, you have seen that, yes. So we're starting to set the scene a little bit more. And to be honest with you, I really think I wish when we did the Maesteg lecture, I should have probably introduced it a little bit more, but we didn't. But anyway, so this is a rather interesting look for Llantrisant Castle. Now, with all due respects, this is a Norman castle, but it looks very similar to Castell Coch in lots of ways. But this is a reconstruction of Llantrisant Castle, and it's very much a castle that controlled the landscape, could be seen for miles around. It was one of those castles of Norman control, Norman sentiment. We are here. If there was anything here before the Norman castle was built, we are now in control of it. And what we need to do is just tell you a little bit more about the Edward stuff, actually. So it said a little bit of a story here, a little bit of a backstory, that there was it was long thought that Edward II was homosexual, and his wife knew that, Isabella. And Isabella, the she-wolf, as she's termed by the Despensers, who were great friends of Edward II, that Isabella was running this rebellion. Now Isabella had the son of Edward II with her, and she was a great ally of Roger Mortimer. And if anyone knows anything about Owain Glyndŵr, they will know that the Mortimer family, 80 odd years later, sides with Owain Glyndŵr in the Great Rebellion in the 1400s. But that's another story. So this is why you may have heard across the name Mortimer. Now, one thing about this is that Bristol Castle is in 1326 besieged by the forces of Isabella and Roger Mortimer in the year 1326, Bristol Castle. And what happens is that what Edward wants to do, he wants to get out the country to France, to Ireland, come back to mainland Britain with an army, and then defeat his estranged wife, see Roger Mortimer hung, drawn and quartered, grab all of Roger Mortimer's land, and Edward could reign longer with the likes of the Despenser family. And it's said that Hugh the younger Despenser may have actually been another lover of Edward II. But what happened is that suddenly, I was just going to come up with a term, but I'm going to say it. Edward II had the willies, and decided to leave Bristol Castle with his lover Hugh Despenser and a little group of soldiers. A certain Despenser's father, Hugh Despenser the Elder, was executed by Isabella and Roger Mortimer, Bristol Castle. They fled all the way, I think, via Flatholm, all the way over to Cardiff, and then they headed from Cardiff up to Llantrisant, and they were captured by allies of Isabella. And guess where they were kept? They were kept in this tower at Llantrisant Castle. And the claim to fame of Llantrisant is this is where Edward II was held prisoner on the 16th of November in the year 1326, before he was transferred to Berkeley Castle, where he, up until that point, up until September 1327, his great friend Hugh Despenser had been hung, drawn and quartered. And remember those words, hung, drawn and quartered. And on the 21st of September, it said at Berkeley Castle, Edward II died, and all rumours are probably true, that he had a hot poker shoved up his behind, causing a shock to the system, and then septic shock, obviously killing him almost instantly. And then when the body of Edward II was displayed to his son, the Berkeley family said he died of natural causes, because I don't think anybody's going to inspect his back passage, are they? No, they're not. And the reason why I've mentioned the word hung, drawn and quartering is that comes into the whole story associated with Llywelyn Bren. And this wonderful story in front of me of Mary Trevilian's, where she talks about Brenin Clwyd, or Grey King, otherwise known as Llywelyn Bren. And this story here, written by wonderful Mary Trevilian, writes from the English point of view that Llywelyn Bren is a very horrible man, but there's a little bit of a side story associated with this, which we'll go on to very shortly. But before we go on to that very shortly, can I tell you a little secret? I know somebody in my Bridgen class whose name will not be mentioned, George. And George was a stonemason 40 years ago, right? And guess what he was building over here? A little bit further off screen, not by here, a little bit further off screen. He was building a wall and an extension to a house. And guess what he decided to do? He needed stone. And 40 years ago, he took a load of rubble from the castle and used it to build the boundary wall and the house. Isn't he a very naughty man? So yeah, but I love little stories like that. But when you look at this is rather good, because it's without sort of some of the modern houses on the slope. There's sort of allotments down here. It's sort of more, you got the castle here, and there may have been a wall around it all. The church is over on the left. And actually, one little bit of a confession. I know I opened with this being a Norman castle, but when I actually gave a walk up here, I can remember going up this steep slope, saying to my little gang, "You see the wall there?" They said, "Yeah." "Do you notice that wall's built slightly differently from the rest of the castle?" Because I believe that this wall here may have been what's left of an earlier castle built before the Norman period. So when you go up there, just as you go down the slope from this tower, you can actually see, this wonderful little bit of wall. And I do actually know that somebody else is trying to join us. So we're going to have to see who they are. Or somebody's written something. Who's written something? John's written something. "Nothing much changes when it comes to stealing stone, does it, bruv?" Do you know what? That's a good comment there, John. Now, if you're in Barry, they're still stealing stone from the dock mainly. And anyone who wants to look at the group chat can do throughout the course of the lecture. It's sort of a little button. If it comes up yellow and flashing, then that's what you can do. But for the meantime, we're going to carry on. So people can still get to me in the lecture, Amy. My God. Now, do you know what, right? What are we looking at, Amy? Do you know? I would say no, but I'm going to challenge you. Where could this have been in the late 1960s? There's a challenge there. Come on. This is unfair. This is known as the Greyfriars in Cardiff. This building used to stand in the heart of Cardiff. Can you believe it? Yes, it did. This was the home of the Herbert family in Cardiff in the late 1960s. And I know a man who's in my Bridgen class who remembers this standing, and one day he went out and it was all knocked down. This was what was left of the Greyfriars in Cardiff. But basically, they knocked it all down. And these are the remains of the Grey Friary in front of you. They basically demolished it all and built a Pearl Assurance building. So when people woke up the next day, they said, "Where's the building gone?" "Oh, we didn't know it was old. We knocked it down." That's what happens in Cardiff. Lots of things have happened like that in Cardiff. Anyway, the reason why we mentioned this, Amy, is because this is to do with Llywelyn Bren. Llywelyn Bren was, and what I'm going to do, I'm not going to spoil the Llywelyn Bren bit too much, because on my Wednesday evening, and I know Gillian and Ellen's in on my Wednesday evening, Archaeology and History of Cymru. We've got a Ivor Bach and we've got a Llywelyn Bren lecture. What I'm going to basically mention is that Llywelyn Bren is buried here, but he's got a massive link with our Llantrisant, a massive link with Llantrisant. And a bit of the backstory quickly is that in 1314 there was the Battle of Bannockburn, and the heir apparent of the De Clare family was killed at the Battle of Bannockburn. Now, Llywelyn Bren had been the Welsh steward, or the Welsh custodian for the De Clare family in South Wales, right? He was the man in charge. He was a Welshman, but he was in charge looking after the Norman lords' estates. They were okay, you know. People liked Llywelyn Bren because he treated the people fairly. He was one of the people, and basically taxes were collected. That's what the Normans were interested in, no problem. But after the death of Lord De Clare at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, and large numbers of men and a few women from Glamorgan, Llywelyn Bren was left with a problem. He was out of a job because the land was forfeited and given over to the Despencer family. We've mentioned the Despencer family. There we go. Despencer family. Yeah. Hugh Despencer and all the rest of it. It was Hugh Despencer who had Llywelyn Bren executed. And to be honest with you, it wasn't even the wish of Edward II to have Llywelyn Bren executed, because they knew if Llywelyn Bren was executed, people in Glamorgan would rise in rebellion, and they would support Isabella, the wife of Edward II, and a certain Roger Mortimer. So, you know, the killing should never have taken place. The execution actually happened at Cardiff, and it was a terrible affair, which I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about. So there we go. What happened was that what happened was this. When Llywelyn Bren, in his rebellion in the year 1316, surrendered to Lord Mortimer, you know, Isabella, Mortimer, surrendered to Lord Mortimer. And Lord Mortimer promised Llywelyn Bren that you'd get a fair trial, right? And if you're found guilty of the rebellion, you'll just be hung, right? And they wanted to see justice done. But Llywelyn Bren didn't have a fair trial. And before Roger Mortimer could intervene on Llywelyn Bren's behalf, he was executed at Cardiff. He was hung, drawn, and quartered. And it was a very terrible hung, drawing, and quartering. So basically what you would do, you would just gently stretch somebody's neck, not until they're dead, right? You just sort of, you don't break their neck or anything. You just temporarily paralyze them, right? And then what you do, now this is a nice medieval time illustration, Renaissance illustration, so you know it's a little bit after the date. So what happens as they're still alive, you cut them open, right? But we've missed out a stage. We've hung, we've not really drawn them yet. So what would happen is they would be sometimes dragged through a street. Their limbs would be pulled by two horses, right? So that's the hung, and then drawing again. And then what would happen? They would be dissected whilst they're still alive.
Ugh.
And this is not a silly illustration. This is, so what you're talking about, you're slicing their front open, and the executioner is holding the man's beating heart. And then they take out the kidneys and show the kidneys, show the liver, and might tear out a liver, because tearing out a liver is not going to instantly kill you, right? You keep the heart beating for as long as possible. And then you would hopefully, you've probably seen the film Bravehearts, right? It was a bit more gruesome than that. And then what would happen, if we go back to the other illustration, we have limbs of the individual being slightly fried. The body would be quartered and the bits of the body sent all the way around the kingdom. And Edward II thought, oh my God, Amy, this is going to cause so much shit. So it was a Welshman that brought the downfall of the king.
Wow.
Which is a good thing, really. There's Hugh. There you go, Hugo. Dispenser. You can read that clearly there. Hugo there. Dispenser. There he is. And that's the basically. This is him. That's his coat of arms, and this is the man that's reviled. Now, do you know what? We need not to do this a minute. What I'm going to do, I'm going to read the story and hopefully upset Gillian a bit more, because she's not enjoying looking at this, but I can't see her reaction. So here we go. Now, I love I love the stories of Mary Trevelyan. I can't go without it. I'd have no lectures if it wasn't for her. But from an English point of view, Llewellyn Bren was reviled. He was hated. And lots of texts are written from an English point of view. And this is a text written from an English point of view about Llewellyn Bren. So here we go. Llantrisant. Stories about Brenin Clwyd, the Grey King, or Monarch of the Mist, were told in most of the mountainous districts, just north of Llantrisant and in Llantrisant itself. In the north, he was described as being very mighty and powerful. He was represented as sitting among the mountains, robed in grey clouds and mist, and woe to anybody who was caught in his clutches. Snowdon and the ranges, Cadair Idris, and other lofty places were his favourite haunts. In the south, Llantrisant, he was regarded as hungering for victims, and children were warned not to venture up high into those mountains, lest Brenin Clwyd should seize them. This is a bit like that story in Watership Down, isn't it? Where that horrible rabbit will get you, woundwort. So late as the first half of the 1800s, whenever an adult or a child was lost in Glamorgan, people said Brenin Clwyd had seized his prey. So in other words, if any children went missing and they never returned, it meant that this Llewellyn Bren, this Brenin Clwyd had killed them. He was being reviled now. It's almost as if the dispenser said, I know we're bad people for executing him, right? But this is our revenge for our deaths. An old woman said that when she was a child and visited relatives at Llantrisant, the children believed the Brenin Clwyd lived among the local mountains. She said that many a time she shuddered when they ascended to the mineral wells on the Smilog. I have driven through the Smilog many times, folks. And because some of you have probably realized I've got a foresight. I get occasional days where something tells me don't go along that road, and I hear about in the news that somebody's been stabbed or there's been a car accident along that road. So, but I do go over the Smilog when I feel it's appropriate. Basically, Smilog, for those that know, anyone wanting to go from Bridgend to Llantrisant, they've got to pass through Talbot Green. And before they get to Talbot Green, there's a turning on the left that goes over the Smilog. It's a very strange, weird landscape. I would not want to live there. And it goes on to say, to the mineral wells on the Smilog and was glad to come down because the people and children warned everybody not to linger late, for the Brenin Clwyd would be after them. She was further told that there was no trusting him, for sometimes on the brightest summer evening he would come suddenly and draw them into his clutches. In other words, beware. And finally, this is going a little bit north again. A resident in the north was fond of telling stories about Brenin Clwyd, who came stealthily and silently up through the ravines. There's lots of ravines in Williamstown, which is north of Llantrisant, or sat waiting among lonely peaks to imprison the unwary. In the childhood of those old men, few cared to make long ascents, and even the guides were nervous occasionally when the old people talked in the fireside corners about the even silent and gloomy but treacherous Brenin Clwyd, whose movements were never heard when he came to take his prisoners. So if you ever lose any children, it's because of him. But that's told from an English point of view, not a Welsh point of view. But we are talking about treacherous Llantrisant after all. Now I've got another story from Mary Trevilian again. So, and what I'm going to say, Amy, you know this group chat that we've got.
Yes.
Are you able to sign into it? Because John,
I've got it here, but I think John's only sending those messages to you because there's nothing coming up in the chat for me.
John, don't send them privately to me. You've got to send them so that Amy can read them, okay? So if you're reading the chat there, Amy, right? You can feed me some information through, okay?
Yeah, okay, I can see the chat there.
So, well, actually, what are John's comments so far? Only if they're positive.
I can't see any comments. Literally, the chat is blank. A notification should come up if.
Okay, I can tell you what he said. He said there are innumerable Llantrisants in Wales. Is this one the same as where the mint is? John, if you had been looking at the maps earlier on, you'd have seen it. That's why we had a map. And he's talking about fishing in the area as well. So I'll leave that with you. So this next story is associated with, I'm not going to do a scratch and sniff. This is Hawthorne. Lots of names for Hawthorne, but here we go. Now, do you know I mentioned that you mentioned that on the left you had the church and the castle on the one sort of hill, and then the ridge went along and you got another bit, and I said that's where the castle should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a hawthorn tree standing there once, and this I've never read this story before. Obviously, I've read it today, but I've never made it public. Here we go. It was generally supposed that when hawthorn trees stood on mounds in fields and quite apart from hedges, they marked the site of a warrior's grave. Interjection, folks. The historian Brian Davis believes that there's lots of graves of kings mentioned being in the Glamorgan area. And if you read the old stories, going like the Mabinogion, you'll read references to loads of different graves. And this could be one such grave. That's why they may not have built on it. That's my take. Long years ago, in a corner of a field near Llantrisant, there was a very old hawthorn. A man living near at hand had heard his great-grandfather telling a story of buried treasure in places like that, and determined to try his luck, he must first gather some springwort. Okay, so this is a hawthorn. Let's do a bit of springwort. Hang on a minute, just make sure. Do you know what, right? Do you know what? I actually had an image of springwort earlier on, but for some strange reason I got my forget-me-nots. But don't worry, this is where the story goes. So he was determined to try his luck. He must first gather some springwort and forget-me-not flowers, which is in front of us, and leaves, and make them into a girdle. So obviously one of those girdle women used to wear to sort of keep their figure in, which had to be worn around the waist next to the skin. So probably a little bit of a reaction there. A sprig each of the herb and flower were to be worn in the hat. So he had a hat as well. I'm not thinking he's doing this naked, by the way, but obviously that stuff is under his clothing, hopefully. Otherwise, he becomes a woodwose. In this way, the man went to seek the treasure. A condition to be fulfilled was that each time treasure was taken away, the sprigs of the herb and flower worn in the hat were to be left as an acknowledgement of the transaction. Do you know what? Before I actually got into my faith years ago, whenever I used to go into burial chambers in Cyprus, I used to feel I had to leave something behind. And now I know why, because if you take something, you go into an ancient monument, like you take some essence or you pick up a stone, you've got to leave a gift behind. You've obviously come across that, yeah?
Yes.
The man dug beside the hawthorn tree and soon found a way past the warrior's grave to a large cavern where there were many human bones, beyond which he saw high heaps of gold. The entrance from the grave to this cavern was hidden by a stone covered with strange inscriptions. So when we look at strange inscriptions, we can look at Tarrant Dyson in a short while, but that's nothing to do with this site. The man went for some months to the spot, and unknown to anybody, secured as much treasure as he could carry. So there we go. We've heard of that many times before, haven't we, Amy? Where we go to like Ogmore Castle. And
Yes.
you remember the one about Merlin, where if you go into the cave and he went back for more gold because his wife told him to, yeah, and he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
but you know, greed does things to your mind, doesn't it? Yes, it does. It does. The man went for some months to the spot, and unknown to anybody, secured as much treasure as he could carry. So there you go. Okay. There are no rules to this, is there? It's just a bit. It sounds as if it's like a pixie, and the pixie's saying, over there's a bit of treasure, you know. So a year passed, and the man grew very rich because he kept going back, and every time he went back, he would leave something behind. Yeah. So he remembered. Yeah. So you know this is going to go wrong, don't you? So one night he brought a heavier load of gold than usual, and in his eagerness to be quickly home with it, he forgot to leave the herb and flower in acknowledgement of the treasure. Oh no, exactly. But it's not as bad as you think. You know, it's not as bad as you think, Amy. You know, he wasn't followed by a woman who tried to make love to him and so on. When next he went for treasure, he could not remember in which field the old hawthorn grew, and was never able to find it again. So, you know, but the thing is, surely he would be happy with that little bit of gold he had in the first place. But they never are they? Never. So, moving on a little bit further. Oh, who are we looking at now? So, we're looking at the Battle of Crecy. Now, if anyone knows anything about the Battle of Crecy, and I do believe the little boxes flashing, what's the message in there, Amy? And I'll take a little drink.
I will have a look.
Thank you.
Message. There's no message in my chat.
Well, don't worry about it. Whoever's writing messages, they should have said it to everyone. This is about the Battle of Crecy. Now, one thing that the traitors of Llantrisant, and that's what they are. Remember, Welsh bowmen fighting alongside the Black Prince, the prince that never ever become king. This Black Prince was meant to become king. This would have been, I think this is the son of Edward III. So this is the Black Prince. And this Black Prince took an army of bowmen, longbowmen, from Llantrisant all the way over to fight alongside the Black Prince. And this is what Mary Trevelyan says about these people of Llantrisant. In former times, if anybody called the Llantrisant people the Black Army, yes, they would be ready to fight. So in other words, if they are the Black Army, they're ready to fight. And they're ready to fight you, Amy, for calling them that in the first place. This arose from the fact that a great number of Llantrisant people and others in the district went out to fight with the Black Prince. Instead of being honoured by the Welsh, they were bitterly reproached for joining the Sassenach. These are Sassenach lovers. These are English lovers. But interestingly enough, a little bit further south, you've got Penturk. People living in Penturk, they're like nice people in Penturk, but they're in a time warp. You seem to go there and there's like, you know, that stuff that used to roll in the streets of cowboy and Western films? Yeah, Penturk's a bit like that. And it said about Penturk, near Llantrisant were called the peacemakers of Penturk because they were the whips. Those were the ones who said, let's have a bit of peace. They never went out fighting. In the days of old, when feuds were many and fighting was common for the slightest pretext, the men of Penturk were celebrated for their efforts in coming between opponents and settling disputes. Do you know, it reminds me of that story in Llantrisant, you know, the one about the boys of Llantrisant, that one of theirs is actually killed in Brecon and they go up and they beat them up with their fists. That's what that reminds me of. Anyway, sort of moving on again. So do you know what? We've got to do justice to this church, and we're gonna go around this church a little bit. That's the north porch. Right, there's loads of graves, it's full of graves. Do you know, you go into that church graveyard and it's much higher than the surrounding ground because there's literally thousands of dead buried there. It's stinkingly full of dead. Now, this is the north side. So never eat south side shredded wheat. And this, if you look out from here, right, this looks out all the way out to sea. It's amazing. And to be honest with you, it would have been good to have done my stories about Trebanog. You know, the in my book about you've got the girl who looks out to sea for her boyfriend to come back, and she breaks her neck at the end. Yeah. So it reminds me of something like that you can stand there and look out to sea all your life if you want. And this itself is the south porch. So why is there a north porch and a south porch? But you know what I'd like to do before I actually go on and say any more, what we need to do, and that's what we're going to do eventually. What we're going to do is, didn't really want to do this much at all. You know, Llantrisant, the place of tree. So you've got to break it down. The word lan being the land being the settlement or holy place or religious place of tree, which is the three saints. Tree being, and then when we look at Taran Dysant, the Dysant, the place of the two saints. So this is that. So Owain Glyndŵr is said to have gone to Llantrisant and captured it and burnt the town down because it was like an English loving town. But there were probably lots of Welsh people there as well. So do you know what? We've got 3 things left tonight, and hopefully we can get through them all. But do you know what we're going to do? As I set the scene spookily, the north porch.
Yes.
Whoa. So, as I said, I wanted to introduce a story from outside the area tonight. This is a story which is called Angelsta, right? And it's a rather interesting story. Folklore says villagers in Llangenoedd, midway between Abergele and Llanrwst in Gwynedd, North Wales. This is where I get my Welsh accent, I must stop. Learn their grim fate from a supernatural being under the boughs of a 3,000-year-old yew tree. And guess who's going to be visiting that 3,000-year-old yew tree next Wednesday? Moi, in my Archaeology and History of Cymru, you know? Amy, you could join us if you want. Yeah, we'll have a chat about that at the end, you know. Okay. Anyway, that aside, all those that aside, Each year on Halloween, on the 31st of July, Angelster is said to appear in medieval churches, and in particular this one up in North Wales. On those dates, it solemnly announces in Cymraeg, in Welsh, the names of those parish members who will die shortly. So, Amy, if you're standing in that church,
Right.
Each year on Halloween on the 31st of July, right?
July.
You will hear those names being read out inside the church.
Okay.
But make sure it's not your name that's being read out.
Oh, I doubt it. I'm already dead, Carl.
Okay, fair enough. And I do believe John has left a message. So let's see what he says on this one. He's talking about his fish. What's that got to do with a lecture? Anyway, let's get on with the story. Get on with it. So yeah, I tell you what, I'm sure people who do my lectures are starting to lose it. Nothing personal, guys. According to folklore, one Halloween, a tailor called Sean ap Robert scorned the idea of Angelster while drinking in a local pub. His fellow drinkers challenged him to visit the church to prove the story groundless. So in other words, people were going on about this story. I wanted to put a strong Welsh accent there, but I don't want to. It was saying, hey, Sean, you know, if you go up to the church on Halloween or the 31st of July, the names of those who will die that year will be read out of the church. And Sean's going, nah, no way. And they go, oh, go on. Go into the church on the 31st, right? Listen to the names being read out, right? Unfortunately for him and everybody else, because nobody had accepted the challenge, he took up the challenge. So Sean made his way to the church, but when he arrived at the door, he heard a deep voice from within reciting names. And the first name he heard was his own.
Oh.
So actually, this story is much bigger than I'm letting on, because when we get to this story actually at the church, it's a bit longer than this. But anyway, so he's standing at the church door. It's like 12 o'clock, and then Sean goes, hold on, I'm not ready yet to listen to the names being read out. But ready or not, he died later that year, right? Now, that's the story in brief, actually. But what it is, that story is directly connected with the North Porch, because in the extended story, he actually does go into the church, and he's standing in the church, and a candle he's holding's lit, and suddenly the north door of the church in North Wales opens, blows out the candle, right? He's inside the church, and then his name is read out, right? And then as he's saying, you know, hold on, the north door opens again, the evil entity leaves, and the north door closes, and then that's the rest of the story. And we now have to turn on to the other story, which is linked to the one with North Wales, directly with this church graveyard. And I can remember being told this, because when I was told this years ago, what would happen is that because you've got the north door and the south door, when there's a funeral procession, and just walk down here with me, Amy. Let's do a bit of a drawing here.
Okay.
So let's sort of, so here we go. Let's sort of walk down here, right? And whilst we're walking down here, a bell at the front of the funeral procession's being rung, and a bell at the back of the funeral procession's being rung, and your bell keeps being rung, and as they enter the front of the church, the north door of the church is opened, and it means that the evil spirits can leave the church.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah, because churches are the place that evil spirits preside in Wales, amazingly enough. So what happens? The ringing still goes on until the north door of the porch of the church is closed. So the service takes place, right? And then as they're leaving the church again to sort of do the return journey, as the bell is ringing at the front and the back, right? And to catch the ghosts out, the evil ghosts that there might be waiting in the church graveyard, somebody inside the church closes the front porch door, opens the porch of the back of the church for the evil spirits to go inside. Then they close the door of the back of the church to trap the evil spirits inside the church. The bell's still ringing as they bury the person.
Right.
And as soon as they put the last scoop of the earth on the grave, the bells stop ringing, and then the evil spirits don't know where the body's buried.
Oh, clever.
And I tell you what, right? You don't hear that in England.
No, you don't.
You don't, do you? Thank you for the tea, Michelle. Michelle's lovingly given me a cup of tea.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Yes, it's to keep me going. So, right, so we got to get back with them now. Do you know what? I love these little icons on the screen. Do you know what we're going to do afterwards? You and I, for 10 minutes, are going to play with the icons. So next week, you can start looking at the chat, and you can maybe start doing some drawing on the screen. But anyway, you could give it a go. You give it a go. So this is a brilliant church. So when we go back and do Llantrisant 2, we'll look a little bit more at the church. Right. So what I want to do, I'm going to be very wary that that we've nearly done an hour. But one place that we've got, oh God, we're not supposed to be seeing them a minute. One place that we've got the tradition of the Mary Lloyd that's very strong is actually Llantrisant. For many years, the tradition of the Mary Lloyd kept strong in Llantrisant. Well, practically everywhere else in Wales, the tradition of Mary Lloyd was banned. It's quite ironic that this is a British tradition, not just a Welsh tradition. It's a British tradition, but then it becomes associated with just South Wales, and then it becomes associated with Llantrisant. It's quite ironic that we've got the people of Llantrisant being called, Sassenachs lovers, but a true tradition of the land is kept alive in Llantrisant. It's that irony. And one thing is that what would happen, there would be something known as punko. They would sing, they would knock, they would knock the door. There would be a person, I don't believe this, there would be an entity underneath the gown with a horse's jaw that would snap. There would be people singing, and they would say in Cymraeg, here we come, dear friends, to ask permissions to sing. If we don't have permissions, let us know in song how we should go away tonight. I have no dinner or money to spend to give you welcome tonight. So in other words, what we have, we've got the bit that the Mary Lloyd is asking in the bit if we don't have permission, and then how we should go away tonight, and then the person inside replies, I have no dinner or money to spend to give you welcome tonight, and you both agree for the Mary Lloyd to be entered into your house. There's jollities, there's fun, and it's a really old tradition that goes way, way back. But we can always do the Mary Lloyd again. So what I'd like to do now, I would like to go here. This is a place known as Llantrisant. And Llantrisant is near Llantrisant. And it's referred to as a place of old stones. But it's not a normal place of old stones, my friends. In 1965, this was filmed in 1965, there was a BBC documentary and it was referred to as the procession to Llantrisant in the Llantrisant area in 1965 on Whitsun Monday, and it was filmed by the BBC. And this place is locally called the Druids' Altar, though its origins are more likely to be Christian than Druidic. And, you know, the likes of our wonderful Dr. Price would have been aware of this landscape. And look at this here. Isn't this, have you ever seen anything like this, Amy? This stone? Are you still there, Amy? Oh my God, I'm all alone. Amy seems to have...
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
Look at that. Look at those
I'm
faces.
here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Carl.
I can hear you. I'm still here,
Oh,
Amy.
sorry. My phone. My phone.
Don't worry, Amy.
Sorry.
It's fine. Everyone else can hear me. Just carry on and listen. So what you've got here, you can see these carved heads. Can you see them? Yeah.
I can see them. Yeah.
These are only some of the carvings of Llantrisant. Now, I know somebody at the end, a certain John, will argue that these are not, these ain't genuine or not, but I don't really care because these actually go back as far as at least 1696.
Wow.
So they've got a little bit of history, and they haven't been carved by a certain Dr. Price, but he would have obviously visited there. And look at that head there. Look at that wonderful face. Those that get the Archaeology Cymru newsletter will remember an article that Michelle and I did about it's basically a bit of a stone that these are carved into. Now, these carvings are first mentioned by the Welsh antiquarian Edward Lloyd. And I'm going to ask Michelle, who can hear in the distance, if she can get any books by Edward Lloyd. So Edward Lloyd visited this site in 1696, in which he suggests it is named Llantrisant, the Rock of the Two Saints, after two faces at the site carved in shallow relief. Is this one of those faces? Because there's a lot more than two faces on this stone. I believe the faces Edward Lloyd is writing. And then he says there's two, and then he says there are at least 8 at present, and not the main feature available to suggest its period of origin. They're integral to the site as a whole, but there is much else there to aid in determining the age and possible use of Llantrisant. 2 natural features at the site appear to have commended it as a site of worship. The spring issuing from a vertebral crack in the rock face, and a few feet to the left, seemingly natural prominence on the corner of the rock, which has been added to with numerous petroglyphs and linear incisions. Petroglyph is when you carve into a rock to sort of to show something like this. And if we go again, I think we've got one other. Oh, look at that. Another weird petroglyph. And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if I got, I think this is the last image that we got on these, but I think we'll come back to these because there's lots more images showing. And it goes on to say, the site faces due east. That is to say, it faces the rising of the sun. The spring issues forth from the rock as the sun rises, and so the rising sun penetrates the rock where the water exits to begin its journey to the sea. And now, I don't think this is Edward Lloyd writing, in the Neolithic period and since, such natural features in the landscape were held in great esteem, places of power where the veil between this world and the other was at its thinnest. So in other words, what we're talking about, this is like that Halloween thing when, you know, All Hallows Eve, it's the thinnest of the year that the spirits come back and forth, you know, the ghosts, yeah?
Yeah, cool.
Worship of the goddess and journeying to the other world could be achieved at such a site by the dead or their representatives in this life, otherwise known as those shamans. And to be honest with you, that would be a good place to stop, because I'm actually feeling very energized by this lecture tonight. There's something about it. So what I'm going to say is that if anyone doesn't want to show their face in the recording, they need to take their video off. None of your faces have been recorded tonight, but we're gonna, in a couple of seconds, we're gonna go on for you to all talk. So you've got a couple of moments to put your video off, and we'll just be able to hear your voice on 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna have all your mics on, unmute you all. And what I would like to do is keep all your questions very sensible. And do you know what I'm going to do is start off with Gillian. For your first, for the first one you've done with us, Gillian, how have you felt tonight's gone? Have you enjoyed it?
Yes, I did. And I was surprised to hear that Edward I had been through Cardiff.
Edward II.
Edward II, sorry. I didn't know that.
Yes, he had. And he thought he could find friends in Wales. But unfortunately, Gillian, when you've murdered the hero, when you know his friend Hugh Despenser has murdered the hero of the South Wales people, I don't think he's going to find many friends, and he didn't. And this is where Llantrisant, exactly. Thank you for that, Gillian. What about you, Karen? Anything you want to say?
No, I just thought that Taryn Dyson was very interesting.
Do you know what?
Is that actually in Llantrisant or just nearby?
Just north of Llantrisant. What we're gonna do, I don't know if some of you are aware, we've just had an update that we'll be receiving £690 in a grant, and we'll be making films of places. And Taryn Dyson can be a place that we make a film. And they because of the nature of the grant, you know, we'll probably say to people, if you could send us a stamp, you can have the video sent to you on DVD in the post, because, you know, it's a grant, and that's what we'll be doing, things like that, many things like that. Right, Barbara and Sue, anything to say?
No, it was fascinating, and yeah, just quite horrifying about, you know, how they killed the king. But hey ho, it was effective.
Hey ho, he was English. Right, okay. What did I just say? Right, okay. Who did we just leave? We just lost John. Okay, John didn't want to say anything. So who hasn't asked anything? Ellen, and we'll have Pam's sexy voice to end with. Ellen, is there anything you wanted to say? Oh, no, Ellen. I don't think she's worked out her talking mic yet. Pam, let's hear that voice of yours.
Right, just a comment. Used to live in Sturgersey, and there was a castle there, but there was also a church, and it had a north door. And this was actually blocked, and it was made into a prayer chapel.
So Pam, I really didn't get much of that. So basically there was a church. Right. Go on.
Yeah, there was a church, and there was a north door, and it was blocked. And that area was made into a prayer chapel.
Well, I think Pam, that really speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's a very old church.
It does. The thing is, only in Wales can you have the devil inside the church.
Ah, right.
So you know, when the north, it's blocked. Yeah, when it's blocked, it means that the devil can't exit. But if it does try and exit, it ends up going into the chapel. I can't. Okay. Look, this is Wales for you.
Yeah.
I got to balance it. People in Wales are a bit nutty as well. So next week, we are going to be looking at St. Nicholas. So unfortunately, when we do look at St. Nicholas, I've probably got to get all the protection out there, because, you know, so we'll give that one a good go next week. So for those that I'll be seeing in the week, those that get a phone call off us, I'll be speaking to you in the week. Anyone got anything else to say before we close it tonight?
No.
No.
So have you all
see you in the week.
Have you all enjoyed this tonight, guys, girls?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Anyone want a quick chat about anything at the end can. Amy, I'll have a chat with you. So I'm going to say good night to you all. So night, Karen, Barbara, Sue, Gillian, Ellen, and Pam. Night. I'll see you all very, very soon. Few days.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Night, everyone. Night.
Night, everyone.
Night, everyone. Night.
Nos da.
Nos da chi. Diolch yn fawr chi. Right, Amy, right, right, so you know this chat thing on the screen?
Yes.
So if I say, for example, made you a host, right?
Yeah.
Right, do you want to change the host? Right, no, it means that I've got to make you, no, hang on, I can't change you to the host because it means I lose control. So if I, let me work this out. So if I...
Because there's a little drop-down box that says who you can send to. So John was obviously only sending to you.
Which was a shame, really, because it was no good.
Mm.
Right, okay, hang on a minute. It says on your participate, no one, host only, everyone publicly. Right, so in other words, I did have an option to have only public speaking. So if I so next week I want you to open that chat box, and I want you to say and just sort of interrupt at the appropriate moment. So somebody's got this to say, but I don't really want to know about. I have fished at a fishery there, Seven Oaks. Bruv, Sister Amy would not know about the mint or Seven Oaks, hence private to you. What the hell?
What?
Don't ask. He's a bit odd.
He is. I saw. He's had a bit of a warning this week. I saw.
Yeah, he has had a warning, and